Hey, everybody. My name is Gregg Cohen from Campus Bound, and I'm here just to spend a few minutes to talk about some things you should be thinking from the financial perspective as your student starts their college search. I've been helping people with the college financial side of things for about 20 years as president of Campus Bound, and we're a full service college consulting company. But we also, when we do a search at Campus Bound, we think about, is it a good fit from an academic standpoint, from a non-academic standpoint, and a financial standpoint? And I encourage for many of you to be thinking about all those three as you start the process. So what I'm going to focus on today is just a few things that you could be doing now. If you're a junior or a sophomore and you're just starting to think about your college search, these are things in the short term that you could be doing, but it could be relevant until you finish the search, depending on how things are going for you. So keep these in mind as you go through it. The first thing I encourage people to do is establish a college budget. And because college costs so much, you want to think about this from a big picture standpoint. This isn't just about how much you have in your bank account that you can spend for college. This is about how you're doing it across your other financial goals, because in what you might be able to do for your other children if you have more than one. So when I say, what's that big picture that you should be thinking about? Think about your retirement. Think about cash flow and what you need to pay your daily bills and weekly bills. What other savings and demands you have on your financial profile, how much debt you can handle or your child can handle, and take the time to really do a deep dive on this. It's not just the back of the envelope thing. As a parent myself of two college students, I know I'm only going to work for so much longer. So in order for me to make my goals to retire when I want to retire, I know how much I can spend it now versus paid later, and that will help me to map that out. So don't just back of the envelope this, really do the math. But also be thinking about where your students' goals are. What is their long-term goal? If they're going to be a teacher, a nurse, a person, an engineer on Wall Street, all these things matter and what that value is going to be for how much you spend on college. Don't assume scholarships. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to figure out how much you might be able to get, but don't assume anything. Just because your son is the greatest player on the soccer team doesn't mean they're going to get a full ride to a certain school. And once you've thought about that, and once you've done the math, discuss it. Discuss it with your student. Early on in my career, there was a family that just didn't want to talk about this with the student, and the student ended up going down a path and falling in love with a college that the family couldn't afford. And it was a very difficult conversation at the end. I had another student that the parents brought the student into the college discussion early on, and the student understood it. So it wasn't a shock as they were comparing their awards. Understand their goals, understand your concerns, and get it out there. And I think along those lines is make sure you talk about student debt as well. If the student's going to need to take debt, only 9% of families talk to their children about student debt, but 70% actually take it out. And students, when you're 17 years old, 18 years old, and you've got all the noise around you, you don't really appreciate, college is expensive, but you don't know what it's going to mean long-term. So if I'm going to take out $20,000 of debt as a student or $100,000, it may seem like the same number for a student who doesn't really get finances. If you talk through the math, understand what the impact might be for them long-term, it can help them to understand that. So have that conversation. So once you've established that and communicated what your budget is, now figure out, okay, what could it really cost for me? And as you're starting to pick those schools, start to look at that. So what are you looking at? What's the cost? What is the published cost? And don't think about it as 1 year, think about it as 4 years. Schools go up a few percent every year, 4 or 5%. So really map out what it's going to cost 4 years. Because once you commit to that first year, you're really committing to 4 years. When you think about the cost, you're thinking about tuition, fees, room, and board. Those are the direct costs from the colleges. If they live off campus, so in maybe the junior or senior year, you can think about what it would cost to have an apartment off campus or to eat at the grocery store versus the dining hall. And then don't forget about the incidentals or the indirect costs. So that could be books, anywhere from $500 to $1,000 a year. Travel expenses, if your student's looking outside of the area, then you may have to get on planes and go visit them and take them home a couple times a year. or storage during the off season. A lot of these students that are applying to schools and going to schools across the country are storing their stuff for the summer. That costs money. And then any incidental expenses. You do want to budget a little bit to have some fun, some spending money, some pizza money. So what is the published cost? Then what's really important, or really an opportunity, is understand, am I going to get any discounts? And there are two major buckets of discounts. The first is, what can I anticipate for need-based financial aid? So you can start to at least get a guesstimate on what this would be at the colleges that your student is interested in. There are two calculators that you might be able to find online. They're okay. They're a starting point. One is called an EFC calculator for expected family contribution, and the other is school-specific net price calculators that are supposed to be on the college's websites. They're not always perfect, especially those net price calculators. Sometimes they haven't been updated in a while. But what you'll be able to see from them is, what's the formula saying? What's the cost that they're expecting of you, or what's the barometer they're using to determine your eligibility, and subtracting that from the cost of the school. So if your expected family contract comes out at $50,000 and the school costs $80,000, you may be eligible for $30,000 worth of aid. On the flip side, if your $50,000 expected family contribution and your college costs $35,000, like an in-state flagship university, you're not eligible for aid. So you really want to see what your eligibility is at the colleges that you're looking at. Now, that's a starting point. You can take it a step further by understanding at the individual colleges, what are the other factors they consider? So at some schools, they look at a non-custodial parent if you're divorced. They might look at business income or assets. They may have different financial aid policies about how much need they give you, how much of that gap they give to you. They might, for non-residents of other state schools, they may not give you anything. So different schools have different formulas and different policies, but see what you can to understand. I've seen students that don't look at this, and then they end up with schools that they don't get any money, and they're disappointed because they like the school, but but the cost isn't right. And I've also seen students that don't think they can pay that full cost of attendance, that full projected published cost, and they are getting aid, and they would be able to finish, go to the school. So really look at this. Am I going to qualify for aid? How much money can I expect? And like I said, some of those calculators in research can do that. The other way, and it's become more and more popular, is can you get merit scholarships? We see colleges that give out $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 or more per year based on nothing to do with the family's finances. It has to do with how those students fare in the applicant pool. How desirable are those students? And some schools get really aggressive with this, where half the class is getting a merit scholarship. So understand, is your student likely to get a merit scholarship at the schools you're considering? How are they a strong student for that school, or is that school kind of a reach? And maybe not be at the top of their applicant pool. And research the policies of the schools. The data is out there, or you can call, but is it 5% of the students get it? That means only the top 5%. How much do they get at those schools? But if you can do some of that research, you can see what kind of discounts am I going to get. The reality of it is that at some of these schools, not many people pay that full sticker price. There are schools out there that 90% of the people get either a need or merit-based discount, grant, or scholarship. Sometimes it's only 1%. So where are you going to fare? How much will you get? And can you move that off of that needle? And that helps you to build that rounded list. So before you're applying to schools, do the research. And, personally, I feel like February, March, April, May are great times to get out there and start to find that school. See what your student's interested in. Estimate the cost based on what we just went over. Do the visits. Record and track the findings. And then make sure as the junior year gets to the end, balance the list. Is it likely? What are your chances for getting into this school? What's the likelihood that you're going to get the financial support that you need to make it affordable? And I think that we keep a lot of data here, but we're not 100% sure about what the awards are going to be or who's getting in where. We do a good job of it, but it's hard to project. especially in this environment that we're in right now, with schools changing their policies all the time, acceptance rates going down. So give yourself those options. Keep your mind open and be prepared to compare at the end. If you have questions about this, if you want us to drill down into your budget or at least or do a financial aid eligibility assessment, we'll do some preliminary work on that for no charge. So you could call us at Campus Bound and say, can you tell me, am I going to qualify for aid? And we have a little form and we will go over that with you. Or help me think through a little bit about how much can I afford? You might be surprised where you can find money. And we'll talk through that. We have a whole host of services here around the college search and application process, help with essays. We help with all the details of the financial aid application process and loans. So check us out and let us know if you have questions. We love helping families through this process, especially the financial part, which is such a mystery for families. My name is Gregg Cohen. Have a great day.